Brazilians see their sort of issues of race in quite different ways. And to now all of a sudden, and this has a very deep socioeconomic set of problems associated, in that to get anywhere in Brazil, you have to go through a university system. And to get anywhere in the university system, most people want to go through the federal university system. So every state has federal universities. And there's traditionally been no sort of affirmative action for either people of color or for people who are poor. And Lula has now introduced an affirmative action program and has created a storm of controversy. First, because there are only so many slots to get into. And this is the zero sum that I was referring to before. Now Lula has to make a call. Is he going to follow through with his program of affirmative action and take the very few spots that are guaranteed in the university and now divide them up amongst constituencies, which his critics now are claiming? Or can he grow the economy large enough so that you could actually grow the number of opportunities, that sort of thing? And the other thing is, in Brazil, who is black? Who is white? This has sort of opened up a huge can of worms about, because in Brazil it's easy enough to say that you may in fact have African blood in you when you phenotypically look white. And a number of people do that all the time. And so this is one of those kinds of issues now that has sort of come into the body politic and has created a kind of a fury. We haven't seen the end of it yet either. Please.
Yes, thank you. It was a really fascinating panel. I have a question about, looking at whether or not addressing the power of the United States through various international institutions that dictate policies, whether or not various political parties can actually basically dictate their own economic and social policies within their countries. But I'm wondering if the panelists can take a vision, 20 years down the line, 10 years down the line, when the United States starts to basically, or in the strong possibility that we go into a very strong recession and start not having even less of a global leadership than we do now. And what about the other actors on the world stage? And I'm kind of looking from a world systems perspective. We are in a crisis. We're on the precipice of a crisis right now in our own country. And if we go back to the 30s, the Depression gave the space to Latin America to actually have an alternative, whether or not that alternative ended up, it had its limitations, but we have all of these visionary social movements, especially from below, as Enrique Ochoa and, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Speaker of Bolivia very eloquently talked about. There are people who have lots of vision, and there is this amazing schism between the political establishment and the people that's just cutting across all of Latin America. So in each of your countries that you are looking at in terms of the world system in the next 20 years and the position of the United States to be able to dictate policies, what other horses are they going to hitch their wagons to, like Europe and Japan and I don't know, Venezuela. So anyway, thank you. Sorry for the long question.
If I get your question correctly, you're asking the role of the United States in the effort of Latin America to improve its society and economy?
We have a strong recession, a very serious recession in this country. That means usually a pullback from trade with Latin America. In Latin America, different countries could possibly take different routes or not feel like they have to do whatever the United States says, or not even want to.
I don't know about a future recession. I think that, and I can just give you more of my words as I talk about world systems, is that I think that Latin America is much more left socialist than the United States is historically. And then what happens is that the only way to impose the neoliberal model is through military coups and dictatorships. And so what we see in Latin America isn't a shift to the left necessarily, but whenever you have democratization in Latin America, you have left people getting, for the most part, getting elected. And then what happens is they go too far to the left according to the elites of their own country and the U.S. State Department. And then what do? They remove them from power violently, and they round up all the leftists, and they kill them all, and they put them in prison, they torture them, and then for a generation, the left movement's been defeated, and now we see its resurgence again. So here in the United States, as Americans, as Norteamericanos, it's very important for us, I think, to keep abreast of that. The effort to overthrow the Venezuelan government, the effort to intervene in Bolivian politics. I mean, Hugo Chavez was elected democratically. He's a very popular guy in his own country, whatever we think, if we embrace the idea of democracy. And the same thing in Bolivia. When we look in Argentina, there was a horrible, dirty war that was carried out by the Argentine military, the neoliberal crowd, and the United States. I mean, that's the reality of it. So the next time around, you know, as Latin America asserts its own political culture, which I think is much more socialistic and leftist than the U.S., the fear is that the U.S. will intervene along with the local elites, whatever country, Bolivia, Brazil, Mexico, to prevent that from happening. And then we could have another round of political violence. I mean, the 80s is an incredible, 70s and 80s is just blood-drenched in Latin America by pro-U.S., you know, military dictators trying to impose a neoliberal model on a population that basically didn't support it.
I want to take a different tack, if I might. I'm thinking about declining U.S. power in the world. Perhaps, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but perhaps the fact that we are mired in this war in Iraq and all of the consequences that that brings with it, and the fact that we are like the largest debtor country, and so on and so forth. All of these, I think, are, you know, to use an old expression, the chickens do come home to roost. And so perhaps part of what we're seeing in Latin America now is in fact a result of the space that's already been created by the United States' distraction elsewhere. And that's, I don't think that's going to change. The United States does not have the power, and we've already seen it did not have the power to prevent Chavez from staying in power, despite all of its efforts to do so. It didn't have the power to prevent Evo Morales from becoming elected and taking office in Bolivia. So perhaps there is, in fact, a growing space now in the region, and perhaps over the course of the next 10 years, we'll see more of that. When I look at Chile, Chile has hitched its wagon to a different star. It has not rejected the market approach. It's tried to explain or kind of, moderate the worst consequences of it through social policy. The current president is now talking about really reactivating the grassroots and having more participation instead of having a kind of, system where the elites in this governing coalition kind of make all the major decisions and negotiate with the right, and the populace is kind of left, to vote, and nothing more than that. But I don't see Chile making a dramatic shift, because it has made a strategic decision. And what it has done, however, is not to try to depend solely upon the United States, but through a series of trade agreements with other regions of the world, particularly looking more towards Asia. It is, in fact, in that sense, putting its eggs in other baskets. But it is not rejecting the market approach in general.
Let's take a couple more questions. I'm hoping that your fear that in 20 years' time we'll have a Great Depression in this country, that may be very optimistic. I sometimes think the hard landing may come sooner.
This is a follow-up to the first question that came from the